World's Worst Children. Windy, Mindy. Once upon a time, there was a little girl known as Windy Mindy. Way back when she was a baby, Mindy discovered she had the most awful talent for breaking wind. Bubble bombs, thumps, toilet tunes, poot-poots, underburps, trouser toots, bottom yodels. Call them whatever you want. Mindy would delight in letting one rip. The little girl was so good at trumpeting, she could compete in it for her country. Mindy's wind took on many different shapes and sizes. The little girl could do silent ones, loud ones, deafening ones, long ones, short ones, ones that went rat-tat-tat-tat like a machine gun, and even explosive ones. Mindy's was a talent that appalled everyone unfortunate enough to be near her. But the little girl was full of mischief and absolutely loved the chaos her wind caused. There would be stampedes in supermarkets, charges in churches, and pandemonium in parks. People would often be trampled underfoot as they tried to escape the smell. Mindy would definitely fill up with all the food that she knew would make her bottom burp. She would devour all of the following in gigantic quantities: baked beans, prune juice, dried figs, porridge, brown sauce, sherbet, turnips, mushy peas, sweet corn, curried eggs, fizzy pop, beetroot, cabbage, lentil soup, radish, cauliflower cheese, bananas, raw onions, Brussels sprouts, and even stuffing. At school, the teachers would often send Mindy out of the class for her outbursts. Mindy would claim it was an accident, but everyone knew that she was doing them on purpose, every single time. Either the noise would be so disruptive or smell so overpowering that the classroom had to be evacuated. Then off Mindy would be sent to the headmistress's office, where she would be giving a stern talking to.
"Mindy, I am extremely disappointed in you,"
announced the headmistress on the particular morning that our story begins. The lady kept the door of her office wide open, just to be safe. "Sorry, headmistress," said Mindy with a smirk.
"This is the 12th time this week a teacher sent you to my office, and it's only Tuesday."
"I said sorry, miss."
Sorry isn't good enough. Today Miss Prism had to send you out of her maths lesson for making a noise like thunder. Yesterday, your poor history teacher, Mrs. Ping, actually fainted in the classroom at the pong that you had made. She had to be sent to the sick bay.
"I think Ping did that pong," suggested Mindy with another smirk.
"It's Miss Ping. And for your information, in the 20 years since she's worked at this school, I have never known the fragrant Mrs. Ping to make a pong. Now what do you have to say for yourself?"
An evil thought shot across Mindy's mind.
What was that?
There was a short delay as the pongtastic aroma floated across the room. Finally, the dark and dirty smell snaked its way up to the headmistress's nostrils. The lady heavily covered her mouth and nose with her handkerchief.
"You wicked child!"
she shouted as Windy Mindy sniffled and giggled.
Get out! Get out! Get out of my office at once!"
She shooed the little girl out of the room as quickly as she could.
Shoo! Shoo! Shoo!
As Mindy took each step forwards towards the door, she blew a little bottom bubble in the direction of the lady. Pfft, pfft, pfft.
"One more sound out of you, and you will be expelled. Do you hear me? Expelled!"
bellowed the headmistress, and slammed the office door shut. Mindy stood alone in the corridor once more, feeling rather pleased with herself. She skipped off, tooting all the way. Not wishing to return to her maths lesson, Mindy looked for an empty classroom to hide in until break time. She slipped into the music room. An array of instruments stood ready to be plucked, played, or blown into. Unsurprisingly, Mindy was drawn to the wind instruments: the saxophone, the trumpet, the trombone, the tuba. All stood glistening on their stands. The biggest of them all was the tuba, and Mindy walked slowly towards it as if in a trance. The little girl had no musical ability that she knew of, and when she tried to blow into the musical instrument, a pathetic rumbling came out. But just as she was about to give up, Mindy had a mischievous thought. She held the end of the tuba behind her behind, blowing wind from her bottom towards the tuba as hard as she could. A long note came from the tuba. Doo. Pleasantly surprised at the sound, Mindy tried again. 3 higher notes came out this time in quick succession. Dee-da, dee-da, dee-da. The girl was beginning to feel like the instrument now. Soon Mindy started putting other notes together in something resembling a tune. It wasn't a classical masterpiece. Rather, it had the feel of free-form jazz. Do-dum, do-dum, do-dee-da, dee-do-dee-dum. All coming from her bottom. At first, the music teacher was horrified at what he saw. One of his beloved instruments was being powered by wind. He was about to shout at Mindy to stop, but the sheer beauty of the music made him pause. As the music soared, so did his heart. This young girl was a musical prodigy. She could become one of the all-time greats, playing huge sellout concerts all over the world. As for Mr. Tinkle, he would be remembered as a humble teacher who discovered a musical superstar. "Mindy," he exclaimed, "you are a genius!"
"It's just my bottom burping, sir,"
replied Mindy.
"I know, but please keep those beautiful bottom burps coming. Sounds like they make a magnificent tune."
"If you say so, sir."
That night, the music teacher rushed over to Windy Mindy's house to talk to her long-suffering parents about his master plan. They were delighted that their daughter's dubious gift could finally be put to good use. And even more delight than that would be to get her out of the house. Now they wouldn't have to sit watching television with pegs on their noses. The next morning at school, Mr. Tinkle presented the girl with a very special present: a shiny new tuba.
"Now, Mindy,"
began Mr. Tinkle,
"I need you to practice, and practice until your bum goes numb.
"Yes, sir."
I have booked the greatest music venue in the world to launch your glittering career. The Royal Albert Hall."
Pfft, went the girl's bottom.
"Was that on purpose?"
asked the music teacher.
"No, sir. Just nerves."
So enthused was Mr. Tinkle about his prodigy's talents that he set about inviting the greatest composers and conductors from all over the world to her concert. He even invited royalty, the Duke and Duchess of somewhere or other. Meanwhile, Mindy did just as Mr. Tinkle said. Every night after school, she spent hours in the music room practicing on her tuba. There was so much toxic gas in the room that the paint peeled off the walls, much to the delight of the little girl. And her big night was fast approaching. Finally, the day came. Windy Mindy was to make her world debut at the Royal Albert Hall. In Mindy's vast dressing room backstage, there was some last-minute preparations. The little girl was delighted to devour as much of her special windy food as she possibly could. Porridge, beans, dried figs, mushy peas, cauliflower cheese, eggs, stuffing, and prune juice were all mixed together in a giant vat before she poured them down her throat. To ensure that she would have enough wind for the performance, she topped it all off with a huge bottle of fizzy pop. Now Mindy's tummy was bubbling with air. Meanwhile, all of the distinguished guests had been sitting in the auditorium. Even the Duke and Duchess of somewhere or other had come. He was in a velvet dinner suit, she in a ball gown with a diamond tiara atop her head. The lights dimmed, and the spotlight shone on Mr. Tinkle as he shuffled onto the huge stage of the Royal Albert Hall.
Your Royal Highness, my lords, ladies, and gentlemen, welcome to this very special evening. Tonight, I am going to introduce you to my musical discovery. A girl who just 1 month ago had never played a note in her life.
There was a gasp from the audience. They could hardly believe their ears.
Please, please,
called Mr. Tinkle over the murmurs that were growing louder by the moment.
You will not be disappointed. This young girl is one of the greatest free-form jazz tuba players of our time. No, of all time.
The audience broke into wild applause. Mr. Tinkle smiled and bowed before continuing.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mindy.
The audience shook their heads in disbelief as the little girl strode onto the stage. Surely there was some mistake. The child was far too small to be a great tuba player. Mindy smiled and bowed to the audience. As she did so, a little pop, pop, pop popped out of her bottom. Mr. Tinkle looked on nervously from the side of the stage. Fortunately, as it was downstage, no one seemed to hear, although one of the backstage workers did faint. Next, Mindy turned round and placed the tuba behind her bottom, ready to blow her wind towards it. The audience were scandalized. They had never seen anything so rude. And in the Royal Albert Hall indeed, which was not just a big hall, but is actually royal. For a moment it seemed like a riot might break out. Mindy looked across to Mr. Tinkle, who gestured frantically to the little girl to begin. So she did. Immediately, sweet music filled the hall. The audience were shocked into silence. The sound Mindy made was beautiful beyond words. After just a few notes, she had everybody entranced. They were all in the palm of her bottom. This was a moment in musical history that the world would never forget, and Mr. Tinkle was sure of it. However, after all the gassy food and fizzy pop, plus, of course, all of the bouncing up and down on a trampoline, Mindy's wind was particularly fierce. The smell was so appalling it actually burned the nostrils when it went up the nose. Needless to say, dear reader, this was the point in the story where things went horribly wrong. Suddenly, the music teacher noticed that one by one, the rows of the audience members were withering like dead flowers. First the front row, with the Duke and the Duchess in it. Then the second, then the third. The stink was hitting them like a tidal wave. As Mindy played on, she forced more and more gas out of her bottom. In no time at all, the entire audience had passed out. Mr. Tinkle rushed onto the stage to make Mindy stop, but the wall of smell floored him in an instant, and he fell off the stage and plunged into the piano in the orchestra pit. Suddenly, Mindy realized that, as much as she wanted to, she just couldn't stop blowing wind. Up until today, she had always enjoyed being able to deliver her trumpet toots. But now her bottom was buzzing out of control, and her bubbly tummy was expanding at an alarming rate. Nothing could hold back the gas. Her bottom was about to go nuclear. There was an eerie silence for a few seconds before Mindy shot so much air out of her behind, so unbelievably fast, that she actually took off like a rocket. The gas propelled her and her tuba up, up, up into the air, and she smashed through the domed roof of the Royal Albert Hall. Mindy zoomed up through the starlit sky at lightning speed, heading straight for outer space. Up there on the International Space Station, the astronauts on board reported hearing some rather impressive freeform jazz. Thinking it might be alien life attempting to make contact, they put on their spacesuits and rushed outside, only to find themselves gazing open-mouthed in shock at a little girl hurtling past with a tuba behind her behind, and a look of terror and panic on her face. That was the very last sighting of Windy Mindy. So what is the moral of this tale, I hear you ask? It's that there's absolutely nothing funny about breaking wind, which is why I would never write a story about it. The end.